Welcome the Lord's chosen. Truth doesn't shout, it waits. And then it shows up when the liar least expects it. There's something almost poetic about the moment a long hidden truth finally walks into the room. You can feel the tension shift. You can sense old stories trembling. And suddenly, the person who once felt untouchable starts looking like they're waiting for the Wi-Fi to reconnect before everything crashes. Because the truth has a funny way of arriving with impeccable timing, late enough to build suspense, but right on time to expose everyone who swore it would never surface. Here's the part people never admit. Lies don't usually fall apart because someone gets smarter. They fall apart because the person who was supposed to stay quiet finally decides they've had enough. And when a chosen one reaches that point, oh, it's game over for pretenders, performers, and professional storytellers. Studies in human behavior even show that once one person breaks the silence, the entire social atmosphere tilts. Suddenly everyone sees what they should have noticed ages ago. It's like when you buy a new car and suddenly realize everyone else has the same car. Except in this case, everyone suddenly realizes the innocent one has been lying through their teeth the entire time. And let's be honest, watching a liar get exposed in real time is one of life's guilty pleasures. You don't want drama, but somewhere deep inside, your soul whispers, well, this should be interesting. It's that tiny sprinkle of cosmic humor that life throws in, just to remind you that karma has a personality and a spectacular sense of timing. So now, after years of playing humble, quiet, observant, and perhaps slightly too forgiving, the chosen ones are finally telling the truth at last. And not just any truth, the kind that makes people shift uncomfortably, look down at their shoes, and suddenly pretend they've always had a feeling. Now everybody sees the culprit clearly for what they are, not misunderstood, not complicated, just a liar who finally ran out of places to hide. This is where everything changes. The silence is broken, the truth is loud, and the masks have officially slipped. Let's get into it. Number 1. The truth exposes patterns they thought you'd never notice. People who rely on lies always assume you're too distracted, too trusting, or too nice to put the pieces together. They underestimate your mind and overestimate their own cleverness. But the truth has a way of gathering itself quietly over time. It collects small details, repeated behaviors, little contradictions, and moments that don't add up. At first, you let things slide because you want to believe the best. You give grace, you wait, you watch. But slowly, the pattern begins to reveal itself. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. What makes this moment powerful is how calm it feels. It's not dramatic or loud. It's like something clicks inside you and suddenly the entire timeline makes sense. The excuses, the sudden mood changes, the defensiveness, the blame shifting, the stories that never stayed consistent. You don't need to go digging for dirt. The dirt has been piling up in plain sight. The culprit didn't hide their lies well. You just hadn't connected all the dots yet. But once you did, everything fell into place with perfect clarity. People who lie forget that patterns don't lie, habits don't lie, behavior doesn't lie, and once the truth starts lining up piece by piece, their entire facade loses strength. That's why they panic when you finally speak. They know you didn't wake up one day and start talking. You've been collecting facts, watching actions, and letting the truth mature until it was undeniable. And the irony is, you didn't expose them to destroy them. You exposed them because the truth was heavy, and you were done carrying it alone. You were done being the only one who noticed the inconsistencies, the manipulations, and the convenient stories that changed depending on who they talked to. When you finally laid it all out, people didn't think you were exaggerating. They realized they had seen pieces of the same pattern themselves, but never had the courage to say it. Your clarity became the missing link, and the moment you connected the final dot, their entire story fell apart without you having to raise your voice or force anyone to take sides. That's the power of truth. Once the pattern is clear, the lie becomes too obvious to defend. Number 2, you became the mirror they spent years avoiding. There are people who can lie to everyone except themselves, and then there are people who lie so much that even their reflection gets confused. But nothing rattles a person more than being faced with someone who sees through them completely. That's what happened when you finally spoke the truth. You unintentionally became the mirror they never wanted to look into. Not because you were trying to expose or embarrass them, but because your honesty reflected the parts of them they've spent years trying to cover up. The reason your truth shakes them so deeply is that it strips away all the excuses they've been clinging to. When someone is used to hiding behind charm, manipulation, or rehearsed stories, facing a person who won't play along feels like a threat. You didn't insult them. You didn't attack them. You simply described what was real. And suddenly, all the coverings they've put over their actions started slipping away. The truth has a strange way of making people uncomfortable without you even raising your voice. You weren't trying to expose their faults. You were just done pretending not to see them. But the moment you removed that silence, it revealed everything they hoped would stay hidden. It's not your words that bothered them. It's the accuracy of those words. People can argue with opinions, but they can't argue with the reflection of their own behavior staring them in the face. What makes this so powerful is that you didn't become their mirror by force. You became it through clarity, through growth, through the strength to call things what they are instead of what they pretend to be. And once you did, they didn't just see your point. They saw themselves. They saw their patterns, their contradictions, their manipulations, their inconsistencies. And for someone who survives by illusion, that's unbearable. This is why they reacted the way they did, not because your truth was harsh, but because it left no room for denial. You showed them the version of themselves they've been running from. And deep down, they knew you weren't lying. You simply held up a mirror they could no longer break. Number 3, their lies collapse because they never expected you to survive the story they wrote about you. People who lie are often confident in their narratives because they believe everyone will bend to the story they've carefully constructed. They assume you'll falter, doubt yourself, or stay silent while they spin their web. That's how they gain control. They craft a version of reality that makes you look weak, unreliable, or even guilty, and they expect it to stick. But what they never anticipate is that you can endure, observe, and come back stronger with the truth in your hands. The collapse of their lies isn't dramatic fireworks. It's subtle, relentless, and inevitable. Every time they repeat the same story, it's one more brick in a wall they think protects them. But for someone paying attention, each brick highlights the cracks. When you finally step forward, armed with facts, clarity, and calmness, those cracks become chasms. The narrative they thought was unshakable suddenly looks fragile because the person it targeted didn't break under pressure. They thrived. It's fascinating how fear works in this situation. The moment they realize their control is gone, panic sets in. They scramble to cover gaps they never thought existed, flail with excuses they thought were clever, and try to rewrite reality on the spot. But lies are brittle. They can't withstand scrutiny, and they certainly can't survive against someone who has already endured the weight of their deception. Every attempt to manipulate or redirect attention only exposes more of the truth, like shaking a table that's already overloaded. And the beauty of it is that you don't need to prove anything to anyone. Your survival is proof enough. Simply existing, speaking honestly, and showing consistency in a world they tried to twist against you is enough to dismantle the entire story. people around you notice it too, often silently at first, until the pattern is undeniable. In the end, it's not about attacking them or seeking revenge. Their lies collapse on their own because they underestimated you. They counted on your silence, your compliance, and your hesitation. When none of that materialized, their narrative imploded under its own weight, leaving only truth standing, and you standing right alongside it. Number 4, the tables turned the moment people saw consistency in you and contradictions in them. Consistency is one of the most powerful forms of truth. It doesn't need an audience, it doesn't need applause, and it definitely doesn't need to be loud. It speaks through your actions, your patterns, your tone, and the way you carry yourself, even when nobody is watching. That's why everything shifted the moment people compared your steady behavior to their unpredictable contradictions. Without you forcing anything, the contrast revealed itself. Liars and manipulators depend heavily on confusion. They rely on shifting details, twisted timelines, and emotional reactions to keep people guessing. Their stories change depending on who's listening. Their explanations shift depending on what benefits them. But your behavior didn't do that. You showed up the same way every time. Calm, clear, collected. You didn't need to adjust your story because you weren't telling one. You were simply living the truth. What people forget is that the human mind picks up on patterns even if it doesn't say it out loud. When someone sees your words match your actions over and over again, it builds quiet credibility. It becomes harder and harder for them to believe the contradictory stories being thrown around by someone who can't keep their script straight. And once that realization starts, everything begins to unravel for the other side. No argument can beat consistency. No performance can erase the fact that their story kept changing while yours remained solid. The moment people noticed the difference, the balance shifted. They began to rethink earlier conversations. They started replaying past events in their minds. Little things they once ignored suddenly made sense. Doubt moved from you to the liar, and there's no coming back from that shift. It doesn't happen with fireworks. It happens quietly, like a slow awakening. You didn't expose them with anger or accusations. You exposed them by being the same person every time while they couldn't hold a single narrative without it cracking. That's when the tables turned, not because you fought harder, but because truth stands steady while lies constantly need repairs. Once people saw that for themselves, their loyalty followed the consistency, not the contradiction. Number 5, they underestimated how many people were quietly observing everything. One of the greatest mistakes liars make is assuming silence equals ignorance. They build their stories, manipulate situations, and play their roles with confidence, believing no one is watching too closely. But truth has a quiet army, and often the people who notice the most are the ones who say the least. The moment you chose to speak, to step into clarity, it became obvious that their audience had been far larger than they imagined. People often assume that deception only fails when someone confronts it directly, but the reality is subtler. Lies fail because they leave traces, tiny inconsistencies, micro-expressions, small shifts in tone that observant people notice over time. Those quiet observers aren't blind, and they rarely forget. They catalog details, connect dots, and watch patterns unfold. They wait, not out of cowardice, but out of patience. And when the truth finally comes out, their silent observations become the undeniable proof that the liar's world has been built on shifting sand. What makes this exposure so satisfying is how naturally it unfolds. You didn't need to shout, exaggerate, or dramatize. Simply presenting the truth and standing firm was enough for the people who had already been quietly aware to step forward, even subtly. Their recognition isn't loud, but it's powerful. It validates what you've been saying and turns the atmosphere against the one who thought they were untouchable. The irony is delicious. Liars act boldly, thinking they're untouchable, yet it's their own assumption of invisibility that accelerates their downfall. They never stop to consider that those around them are watching, remembering, analyzing. They underestimate patience, perception, and the quiet power of people who simply observe and wait for the right moment. By the time you spoke, the groundwork was already laid. Others didn't need persuasion. They only needed a nudge to confirm what they had long suspected. That's why the collapse was inevitable. It wasn't just your truth. It was everyone's quiet awareness finally coming together. The liar may have thought they were performing for an empty room, but the truth revealed a full audience, and the applause for reality is always unavoidable. Number 6, they relied on confusion because clarity destroys their power. Lies thrive in fog. Manipulators know that as long as people are unsure, hesitant, or second-guessing themselves, their control remains unchallenged. They count on half-truths, vague explanations, and shifting stories to keep the focus off their actions. Confusion is their weapon. It makes people doubt their instincts, question what they saw, and wonder if they're overreacting. But clarity is the kryptonite to deception, and the moment you stepped in with unshakable truth, everything they relied on began to crumble. Clarity doesn't yell. It doesn't need dramatic gestures or heated confrontations. It exists in consistency, honesty, and observation, the kind of calm that exposes every gap in their story. When you articulated exactly what happened with precision and composure, it didn't just challenge their lies, it shredded the framework they had built their power upon. Every manipulator fears clarity because it forces reality into focus. When people finally see clearly, there's no hiding, no twisting, no misdirection left. Their advantage disappears, and suddenly, the world they thought they controlled looks like a house of cards. What's remarkable is how quickly confusion gives way to recognition once truth is delivered. People instinctively crave certainty. When someone steps up with clear, undeniable facts, others align naturally. They don't need convincing. They need the mental fog lifted so they can see what's real. The manipulator's attempts to sow doubt or distract attention falter because the foundation of their strategy was based on uncertainty. Once clarity arrives, there's nothing left to manipulate. The irony is profound. All their energy spent crafting clever deceptions is wasted the moment someone refuses to play along and speaks plainly. They counted on hesitation, distraction, and fear, not realizing that those who observe patiently and speak decisively hold the ultimate power. Clarity doesn't just expose lies. It empowers everyone around it to recognize the difference between truth and deception. And once people see the truth, manipulation loses all its charm. Control slips through their fingers because the moment truth shines, confusion no longer protects them and their influence collapses under its own weight. Number 7, the truth didn't make you powerful. Your refusal to be intimidated did. Power isn't born from knowledge alone. It's born from courage. You could have known every detail, noticed every manipulation, and collected every inconsistency. But that wouldn't have mattered if fear had stopped you from speaking. The truth by itself is simply information. What makes it transformative is when someone refuses to bow to pressure, threats, or the subtle intimidation tactics designed to silence them. Your refusal to be intimidated is what turned truth into a weapon, and that refusal is what made people sit up and take notice. Manipulators count on fear. They rely on hesitation, guilt, or doubt to keep people silent. They assume that most will stay small, stay quiet, and let the narrative serve the liar's agenda. But when you stand firm, when you refuse to shrink or pretend their version of reality is correct, That's when the balance shifts. Your refusal to be intimidated doesn't just protect you, it exposes the weakness in their strategy. Lies rely on compliance. Fear is the glue that keeps deception together. When you break free from it, the structure collapses. What makes this so powerful is that it doesn't require aggression. You don't have to yell, argue, or attack. Calm determination carries more weight than anger or theatrics. When someone observes your unwavering stance, it sends a signal louder than any accusation. You will not be manipulated, and your truth will not be silenced. People around you feel it instinctively. They begin to reassess, recognize patterns, and quietly support what they once feared speaking aloud. The beauty of refusing intimidation is subtle yet explosive. It turns the tables without confrontation. It creates a ripple effect where credibility, integrity, and authority naturally shift to the one who won't be pressured. In that moment, you realize that power isn't about exposing someone else. It's about claiming your own space in the face of fear. You didn't just speak truth, you claimed yourself. And that refusal to be intimidated, that's what made everyone finally take the truth seriously. Because power rooted in courage is impossible to ignore. Number 8. Their reactions exposed more than your revelations did. One of the most revealing moments in exposing a liar isn't in what you say, it's in how they respond. People who live in deception are trained to control the narrative, to stay calm, to redirect, to charm, or to intimidate. They think that if they react perfectly, no one will notice the cracks. But here's the truth. Panic, defensiveness, overreaction, and even subtle attempts to manipulate through body language speak louder than any lie ever could. The moment you told the truth, their reactions did all the talking for you. Their defensiveness wasn't random. It was a window into the guilt and fear they've been carrying. Every denial, every flustered response, every attempt to discredit you revealed more than any explanation ever could. You could have delivered your words gently, firmly, or even calmly, and their own responses filled in all the blanks. People watching didn't need to hear your side to understand what was really happening. They saw the disconnect between what the liar said and how they behaved. And that inconsistency is impossible to fake under pressure. It's remarkable how reactions work as proof. A liar carefully constructs a story assuming it will be accepted. But when confronted with unwavering truth, they act from instinct, not calculation. Those instincts betray them. Their panic signals awareness of exposure. Their anger signals accountability they can't bear to face. Their attempts to spin or gaslight show how fragile the story they've built really is. And it's in that fragility that everyone else sees clarity emerge. Your truth doesn't need to shout. It simply shines against the backdrop of their unraveling composure. What's even more powerful is that you don't have to manipulate this or push it. It happens naturally. By standing firm, you create a contrast that makes the other person's behavior impossible to ignore. The reactions themselves validate your words. It's almost poetic. Liars fall apart, not because of what is said about them, but because of how they betray themselves when faced with truth. Their reactions became the evidence, and suddenly, the story they worked so hard to control no longer belonged to them. Every flinch, hesitation, or forced smile told the audience exactly what they needed to know, sometimes louder than any words ever could. Number 9, your calmness became the loudest evidence. There's a strange kind of power in calmness, one that liars can never replicate. While they flail, overreact, or try to manipulate with desperation, your steady presence speaks volumes without saying a single word. Calmness is rare in a world built on drama, chaos, and deception. It signals control, clarity, and confidence. And when you face the lies head-on without losing your composure, That calmness became the most undeniable proof that what you were saying was real. The beauty of calmness is that it exposes instability. When someone lies, they expect noise, confusion, or frantic energy to cover the gaps in their story. But when you remain unshaken, suddenly every contradiction, every inconsistency, and every false claim becomes glaringly obvious. Your composure acts like a magnifying glass, highlighting the cracks in their narrative. People don't need arguments. They just observe the contrast. You don't have to scream or defend yourself aggressively. The fact that you aren't rattled communicates trustworthiness more powerfully than any speech ever could. Calmness also disarms the liar. They rely on chaos and tension to make others doubt themselves, to control the room, and to hide their deception. Your serenity interrupts their carefully orchestrated plan. It forces them to react in ways that betray the truth. They become impatient, defensive, or over-explanatory, and those reactions reveal everything they were trying to conceal. Ironically, your lack of reaction does more damage than any confrontation. They can't match your clarity or composure, and that makes them look weak in comparison. Even the people observing notice it. Calmness is magnetic. It draws attention to the truth because it contrasts so sharply with the frantic energy of dishonesty. Your words are supported by your demeanor, and your demeanor becomes louder than your words. It's a subtle, unstoppable force. In the end, your calmness isn't just evidence. It's a silent authority that no lie can survive. It proves that you are grounded in reality, unshaken by theatrics, and untouchable by manipulation. While the liar scrambles, your serenity quietly wins the room, and people instinctively align with the one who stands unwavering in the truth. Number 10, they counted on your loyalty, not realizing loyalty dies where deception begins. Loyalty is often seen as a virtue, a strength, something to be relied upon. But for manipulators, it's a tool. They assume loyalty will bend, tolerate, and forgive, even when it's being exploited. They believe that as long as you remain committed to them or their narrative, their lies will continue to go unquestioned. But what they fail to understand is that loyalty has limits, and it does not survive in a house built on deception. The moment lies become undeniable, loyalty doesn't just fade. It transforms into clarity and action. They depended on your silence, on the assumption that your sense of duty or commitment would outweigh your perception of reality. They thought you would protect their image, excuse their behavior, and continue to play along with their story. But when someone is both observant and principled, loyalty becomes a test. Will you stay loyal to the illusion or to the truth? For chosen ones, truth always wins, and that's when their entire plan collapses. The person they counted on to uphold their lies becomes the very force that exposes them. The power of this revelation isn't in confrontation. It's in the quiet shift of awareness. Once you recognize that loyalty cannot coexist with deception, you stop defending the undefendable. You stop accommodating falsehoods and begin to speak, act, and live in alignment with reality. And when that happens, the manipulator loses not just control, but the person they assumed would always protect their story. It's ironic how quickly the tables turn. They relied on loyalty as a shield, unaware that true loyalty is rooted in integrity, not blind obedience. When loyalty meets deception, it doesn't crumble silently. It becomes a weapon against the very lies it once covered. Your decision to uphold truth over illusion doesn't just expose the liar, it validates everyone around you who sensed the manipulation but lacked the courage to act. In the end, they miscalculated the one thing they assumed would always be on their side. Loyalty doesn't die quietly. It transforms into the catalyst that brings their lies into the light. And that is the moment when the quiet strength of truth overtakes deception entirely. Number 11. Their lies failed because they weren't built on truth. They were built on your silence. Lies are fragile by nature, but what makes them truly brittle is that they rely on silence. Manipulators know that if the people around them stay quiet, the story can grow unchecked, taking on a life of its own. They count on your hesitation, your fear of confrontation, or your desire to keep the peace. Every false narrative they spin is strengthened by the absence of challenge. But the moment you break that silence, everything they built begins to crumble. Not because you attacked, but simply because you spoke the truth. Their lies have no foundation. They are like sand castles built on shifting beaches, relying on inattention and compliance to survive. The moment you observe, remember, and finally speak, the entire structure becomes unstable. You don't need to argue or prove yourself to everyone. Your voice alone introduces accountability. Their manipulations, once seemingly solid, suddenly appear transparent. The stories they thought would go unquestioned collapse under the weight of reality, and it's your willingness to speak that brings the balance back. What makes this so profound is that it reveals the real source of their power. It's never their cleverness, their charm, or their manipulation. It's the silence of those around them. They rely on the assumption that truth will stay hidden, that no one will connect the dots, that no one will notice the contradictions piling up. When you finally decide not to participate in their narrative, you take away the very thing that allowed their lies to persist. Silence is the secret engine of deception, and breaking it is the most effective act of resistance. The brilliance of speaking out is that it doesn't just dismantle a single lie, it exposes the entire ecosystem of manipulation. Once the silence is broken, others who suspected or observed but stayed quiet begin to recognize the truth as well. The liar is suddenly isolated, unable to maintain the story they carefully cultivated, because the truth once spoken spreads faster than any lie ever could. Their empire of deceit was never as strong as they believed. It was only ever strong as long as you remained silent. And when silence ends, so does their power. Number 12. The truth hit harder because you had receipts they never imagined you kept. There's a difference between speaking the truth and proving it, and nothing shakes a liar more than proof they didn't think existed. They operate on assumptions that people forget, that stories fade, that evidence disappears. They plan their deceptions assuming no one will remember dates, conversations, patterns, or subtle betrayals. But when you reveal the receipts, literal or metaphorical, everything they thought was safe comes crashing down. Your documentation, observations, and memories become a spotlight, illuminating the cracks in their carefully constructed facade. The power of proof is brutal because it removes ambiguity. Liars rely on doubt. They depend on uncertainty, on shifting perceptions, on people questioning themselves. When you bring clarity backed by evidence, there's no wiggle room left. Suddenly, their narrative doesn't just lose credibility, it collapses entirely. What was once a story that seemed plausible now looks absurd in light of concrete facts. People stop debating opinions and start seeing reality because your receipts don't lie. They confirm everything they've been suspecting but couldn't articulate. The irony is in how calm and collected you can be while exposing it. You don't need theatrics or anger. The evidence speaks for itself. And the beauty of it is that it doesn't just prove your point, it forces the liar to reveal themselves further. Their reactions to your proof often betray guilt, panic, or desperation, and in doing so, they confirm what you already showed. What was hidden for years is suddenly undeniable, and the audience, whether friends, colleagues, or peers, can see the truth as clearly as you do. Receipts create a permanence that lies cannot survive. Manipulators often assume that memory and perception are on their side, but evidence doesn't lie. Once you reveal what you've kept, you don't just tell the truth. You validate it in a way that cannot be disputed or dismissed. The truth hits harder not because it's loud or aggressive, but because it is backed by irrefutable proof. And that proof, carefully observed and preserved, turns your words into an unshakable force that dismantles deception at its very core. Number 13. People finally recognize the difference between storytelling and manipulation. Manipulators are masters of storytelling. They craft narratives designed to captivate, confuse, or convince. They use emotion, timing, and selective details to make their version of reality appear true. But storytelling, no matter how convincing, is fundamentally different from manipulation. The moment you spoke the truth, people could suddenly see that difference clearly. Your words weren't designed to entertain or to shift perception. They were designed to reveal reality. That clarity exposed the lies not as alternative perspectives, but as deliberate attempts to deceive. What makes this revelation so powerful is that it shifts perception in a way that no argument could. People don't just hear you. They start to notice patterns they had brushed aside or rationalized for years. They begin to see that the manipulator's charm, excuses, or dramatics were not harmless storytelling. They were strategic tools meant to control perception and gain advantage. Your truth becomes the lens through which everyone else can finally reassess past events, actions, and behaviors. The contrast between genuine clarity and constructed fiction is so stark that it leaves little room for doubt. Manipulation thrives in ambiguity and uncertainty. Storytelling, when used to deceive, relies on the audience's willingness to accept a narrative without verifying it. Your truth, however, cuts through that ambiguity. It doesn't rely on persuasion. It relies on observation, facts, and consistency. That's why people recognize the difference immediately. They understand that the liar's words were never about reality. They were about control. And your calm, deliberate, and evidence-backed truth stands in direct opposition, making the deception impossible to maintain. Once this distinction becomes clear, everything changes. People start to question, reflect, and even speak up themselves. The manipulator loses influence not because you attacked them, but because truth exposed the mechanism of their control. What seemed like harmless storytelling is now recognized as a web of deceit, and your courage in speaking reality becomes the benchmark for integrity. In that moment, the audience doesn't just believe the truth, they see the deception for what it really was. And that recognition, once it spreads, is unstoppable. Number 14. The truth didn't destroy them, their own behavior did. It's easy to think that exposing a liar requires aggression, confrontation, or some dramatic revelation, but the reality is far more profound. The truth itself is neutral. It doesn't attack, it doesn't punish, it simply exists. What truly dismantles a manipulator is not your words or evidence alone, but the way their own choices, patterns, and behavior become undeniable under the light of honesty. Every lie, every excuse, every inconsistency that they relied on to control perception suddenly becomes a reflection of themselves, and it is this exposure of their own conduct that ultimately destroys their credibility. Manipulators build their world on the assumption that others will either ignore, rationalize, or excuse their actions. They believe that reality is malleable as long as their performance is convincing enough. But truth doesn't need to be forceful. It simply lays the groundwork for others to recognize what has always been there. As people witness the contrast between your consistency and their contradictions, the facade collapses under its own weight. Their panic, defensiveness, and frantic attempts to rewrite the story only reveal more of the patterns they tried so hard to hide. In essence, Their behavior does the work for you. The fascinating part is that this collapse is inevitable once clarity is introduced. You could stay calm, factual, and measured, and yet the unraveling would continue because deception can survive only as long as others believe it. As soon as someone refuses to play along, refuses to stay silent, refuses to cover for their lies, all the inconsistencies they cultivated become glaring. The truth becomes the lens through which everyone finally sees the reality of their actions, and the manipulator's power evaporates not from attack, but from exposure. What's remarkable about this process is how precise and natural it is. You don't destroy, they self-destruct. All you do is speak, stand, and reveal consistency in your actions. The liar's own choices, repeated over time, reveal their character far more convincingly than any accusation ever could. And when the audience sees it for themselves, there is no defense, no charm, no excuse strong enough to save them. Their downfall is a direct result of their own behavior, and the truth simply illuminated it. The journey of truth is rarely quiet, rarely easy, and never accidental. What we've explored here is more than just exposing lies. It's about the unstoppable force of integrity, observation, and courage. When silence is broken, when clarity replaces confusion, and when calmness outweighs manipulation, the entire landscape shifts. Lies, no matter how cleverly constructed, cannot survive against consistency, evidence, and the refusal to be intimidated. The very behaviors that once empowered deception become the mechanisms of exposure, revealing patterns, contradictions, and truths that were always there, quietly waiting to be seen. This is the power of truth. It doesn't need to attack, yell, or dramatize. It doesn't rely on theatrics or force. Its strength lies in its unwavering presence, in the courage to speak when everyone else hesitates, and in the quiet revelation of what was always obvious to those paying attention. The liar's downfall is never the result of a single confrontation, but of accumulated choices, repeated patterns, and the inevitability of exposure. And when you step forward as a chosen one, as someone who sees, remembers, and refuses to stay silent, you do more than reveal a liar. You restore balance, clarity, and awareness to everyone watching. In the end, truth doesn't destroy, it liberates. It clears the fog, empowers the observant, and gives voice to the silenced. And the most extraordinary part is that those who built their power on deception ultimately become the architects of their own exposure, while your steadfast honesty stands as the unshakable benchmark of reality. If you found this eye-opening, empowering, and intense, make sure to join the journey. Subscribe to the channel for more content that uncovers hidden truths. Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and share this with anyone who needs to see the reality behind the lies. Your support fuels the mission to reveal the unseen and speak what others have been too afraid to say. Stay blessed always.